Welcome to another episode of Web Development from the Ground Up. This time we're gonna talk about understanding the web and also the types of web development before actually jumping into coding. Okay, so what we're gonna discuss here is the history of web development, types of web development, and web app deployment. So here's a brief history of web programming. Like any other fields like mathematics and medicine, which has been around for tens of thousands of years ago, programming itself has been around for a long time, but how much time actually? It's around 2 centuries ago when Ada Lovelace created her first computer program to calculate Bernoulli numbers. So, it's computer programming. What about web development? Web development is only 30 years old. We can trace back to the first website ever created. Here there's a link you can visit. This website is still active, at least when this video was made. So it's been around for 30 years, but what happened around those 30 years actually? A lot happened basically. So many companies and organizations developed their own style of web development, and we ended up with C#, TypeScript, JavaScript, Java, PHP, Ruby, Elixir, Python, and many more. So how are we supposed to learn all of them? The thing is, we don't have to learn all of them. If you want to learn only Python with HTML and CSS, you can make a fully functional web application just fine. So we're gonna talk about the types of websites. There are two types, which is static and dynamic website. So static website is really easy to make. It's a website only for showing information which don't need to change very quickly. It's usually only coded in HTML and CSS, such as blog, portfolio, and school website. There are several methods to make a static website. The first one is the easiest one. It's a web builder. It's only useful for creating static web pages very quickly. For example, if you want to make a quick announcement, you can use this method, web builder. You can use WordPress or Wix for it. And the second one is static site generator. You don't need a coding knowledge to use a static site generator, but you need to have a command line knowledge and usually markdown knowledge. So the tools are there are many static site generators such as Jekyll, Hugo, Docsify, ViewPress, and Gatsby. And the third one, you can create your own static website from scratch, but you need a really deep knowledge of programming. So if you want to make a quick announcement really quick, creating website from scratch may not be the best option. And then there's dynamic website. Dynamic websites are websites which content change quickly, such as e-commerce, social media, chat, hotel reservation, forum, COVID-19 daily report. And there are two ways to make dynamic websites. The first one is more classic server-side scripting, and the second one is quote-unquote more modern full-stack web development. So in the server-side scripting involve using HTML and CSS with only one server-side language or framework. People back in the day used to use PHP, JSP, and ASP.NET, and there are also more modern alternatives, but I rarely ever see them being used, which is Ginger, EJS, and Go HTML template. So let me give you an example. This is a really simple e-commerce app. Let's say the website is called buyandsell.com. So we type in here buyandsell.com and then press enter. It will load and initiate an HTTP GET request, and then we get the layout, both the layout and the data here. For example, this only shows the initial page of buyandsell.com. What if, for example, we want to search for a thing? We only want to search for shaver, for example. Then if we click go, it will change the page into search.php, and then it will send an additional information to the server, which with this form called the query parameter, and then it will load the whole page. It refreshes the whole page, and then we get the whole page here consisting only the shaver. So that was server-side application. This one is a full-stack web application which consists of a back-end, a front-end, and communication standard, which can be commonly REST or GraphQL. So a full-stack web app consists of client-side and the server-side. And the popular server-side options are Laravel, Node.js, Flask, Spring, and .NET Core. The web front-end right here usually consists of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with an additional framework such as React, Vue, or Ember. And then the client is really flexible. It can be in Android or on iOS or in the form of a Windows application. And then it communicates over a standard called REST or GraphQL usually. I'm gonna give you an example with the last e-commerce application. So here we have the front end and the back end. The front end is stored in buyandsell.com and the back end is stored in the api.buyandsell.com. Okay, so then we hit in the search bar and then press enter. We initiate an HTTP GET request here, and we only get the layout here, consisting of the search bar and the go button. And then it will go and load the initial data to api.buyandsell.com/items, and it will get something like this. This is called JSON or JavaScript object notation, consisting only data, not the layout. The web application will render the data and then it will finally show up the data. For example, like in the last example, we want to search for something. This time we want to search for clothes. And then when we click go, it will load a separate HTTP request without modifying the URL here. And then the whole page does not refresh, only the contents here. As you can see, the search bar and the go button is still there. Then we get the data, only clothes like we requested, and then it will finally show up. Okay, so we're gonna talk about deployment method. Well, one thing I wish I knew sooner about web development is the various methods of deploying web application. Just what is web app deployment? It's a way to make your web application available to the public to access. There are several ways of deploying your web application. The first one is the cheapest one, the port forwarding, and then there's shared hosting, and then there's virtual private server, and then there's app hosting service. So we're gonna talk about port forwarding first. So what does port forwarding mean? It basically just means directly serving web applications from your computer at home directly to the internet. So how can we achieve this? And the first one, we can use our public IP, which is given by our ISP or the internet service provider. And the second one, we can use a tunneling service, external tunneling service like ngrok, for example. So how does this work? The internet is basically just a giant network of computers. Google has their own computer, you have your own computer. For you to connect to Google, there needs to be some sort of medium, and that medium is the internet. For example, this is Google's computer. By the time this video was made, this is the IP 74125.4138. To connect google.com to your computer, you need some sort of service to connect your computer to Google's computer, and it's called the ISP or the Internet Service Provider. And then the ISP will give you a public IP, which will then receive by your computer. You can check your own public IP with whatismyipaddress.com, and then your wireless router connect the public IP to your computer, which has a local IP address. So how do we connect the people who use the internet to access a website stored in your computer? It's simple. Just connect the inbound request of your router to your computer, and then you're done. People who have access to the internet can access the website in your computer. So it's easy and all, it's really cheap. You literally don't have to pay for anything in order to serve a website. But what's the catch? The first concern I can think of is hackers. So what if a hacker wants to gain access to your computer? if you are not aware of computer security, things like DDoS protection, firewalls, and all that stuff, your computer is basically exposed to hackers on the internet. Okay, so public IP is one of the methods to serve your web application to the internet. So it has an advantage, which is cheap, but it comes with lots of disadvantages, which is no protection from hackers, just like what I explained. And then the second one is the risk of computer malfunction. If your computer crashes, then people cannot access your website. And the third one is natural disaster. If a natural disaster happens, then the data in your website will also be destroyed. And the final one is the ISP bandwidth limit. A lot of requests going into your computer will take a toll on your ISP bandwidth limit, and you will hit the fair usage policy really quick. And then there's shared hosting. What is shared hosting? Shared hosting is renting space from other people's computer. So basically, we have a computer provided by the shared hosting provider, which is connected to the internet, and you rent a service in that computer to store websites. So basically, your website, your school's website, your friend's website, it's stored in the same computer. This method is really cheap. It comes with an advantage, which is tons of people use it, so tutorials about shared hosting are abundant. There are really lots of people who use it. And then it's cheap, at least cheaper than most deployment options, and then it's more secure than port forwarding. But it comes with a catch also. The first one is shared resources. If the traffic in your friend's website is high, then it will impact the performance also in your website. The second one, if the provider is down, then all website stored under it is also down. And the third one is that most providers are limited only to the PHP ecosystem. So if you want to use Node.js, Python, you will have to do some extra work to get it working. And then there's virtual private server. So virtual private server is basically just renting a computer in the cloud. So it's a computer which is connected to the internet, which has a dedicated public IP address. And that's it. It's as flexible as forwarding. You can install basically anything in it, and it's really customizable but just more secure. And then you don't have to worry about data loss due to machine malfunction and the natural disasters. And it's mostly backed by major cloud providers. There are tons of major cloud providers who provides VPS services such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Alibaba, and DigitalOcean, but it does come with disadvantages, such as it's a little bit expensive. A virtual private server costs more than shared hosting, and you need to have an extensive server OS knowledge, such as Ubuntu server and Windows server, maybe Red Hat, and many others. The final one is app hosting service. App hosting service basically means that you only rent a service to deploy an application. It's a very simple and convenient way, as we only need to care about our application. The security and many other things is handled by the providers. So, for example, we have Heroku and Google App Engine, which is connected to the internet, and we have three applications. The first one is hotel reservation, which is made in Python, and two other apps made in Node.js and Java. We can take our hotel reservation and daily employee check-in in Heroku, and it will give a dedicated not IP address but a URL in which you can access your application with it. Then we store the medicine store item tracking app into Google App Engine, and it also have a dedicated URL. So the pros of the app hosting service is that it requires almost zero configuration. You don't have to configure anything, it just works. And then It has fantastic free tiers. Both Heroku and Google App Engine provides really generous free tiers. And you don't really have to worry about security as it is handled by the app hosting providers. And then it's loosely coupled. You can have many applications in many different languages and it just works. But it also comes with a disadvantage also. The first one is it's expensive. The paid tier is expensive. When your free tier reaches its limit, then you'll have to pay for it, and when you have to pay for it, it is almost always really expensive. And then the use case is sometimes really limited. It's only for REST API and HTTP based systems. And then finally, it needs a separate database, which is really expensive. So which solution is the best? It really depends on your situation. I have 4 criteria here. If it's only for testing, you should probably go for port forwarding or tunneling. If you are limited on a budget, you should choose shared hosting. And what if you need to go up and running very quickly? You can use app hosting service. And if you want a long-term, fully customizable and also maintainable, you can go for VPS. So in conclusion, we have learned about lots of things today. The first one is about the history of programming and web development. Then we also learned about types of website based on interactivity. There's static website in which you can create with a web builder using static site generator or from scratch. And then there's dynamic web application in which you can create by using server-side application and then full-stack web application. We also covered about deploying your web application, which you can use port forwarding, shared hosting, VPS, and app hosting service. Thank you very much, and please stay tuned as the coding tutorials are coming very soon. Please subscribe to my channel, and goodbye.